Hi guys, I hope you're well. Today, welcome, welcome. welcome one, welcome all. Anyway, welcome back to the Young Podcast. I'm your host, Hannah, and today we're exploring the fascinating yet very unsettling relationship between control, power, and psychology, and how we're being manipulated into extremism, we're being manipulated into supporting different agendas through psychology. Now, to the point where we don't understand what is happening. Personally, I don't understand what is happening to a great extent, but I've been very curious the last few years when I see, let's say, for example, what can I use in this example? Something like, I'm sure you've come across a discussion happening maybe on a podcast, maybe on whatever social platform that you're on, but you've experienced this, I'm sure you have at some point. But personally, I have. And normally, they're usually discussing something that should be logical, something that should make sense to everyone, something that should be common sense to everyone, but they've manipulated it in a way that unajiuliza, am I listening to the right thing? Am I the one who is wrong? And then one thing that most of us have been doing whenever we've come across these clickbaits and these sound bites, like someone is saying something so astoundingly stupid, but I mean, someone have confidence to the point where you start thinking, am I in the wrong? And then you think you're going to get salvation in the you're going to get salvation in the comments, and then you find people supporting this person, and you're like, a good example would be someone like Andrew Kibe in Kenya. Some things that he says, honestly, hata kama wewe ni mtoto, hata kama wewe ni nani, you it doesn't make any sense. It it does not make any sense. But you find people who came for him all the time saying he's speaking the truth, he's just putting the truth as it is, and people are like, which truth? Like, what is he talking about? Because this thing does not make any sense. And those scenarios, those different scenarios, ndio zilifanya I go into this rabbit hole where I'm like, I need to understand what is happening, especially on social media, because people like this keep being pushed. Mi nitashinda nikiclick, I'm not interested, do not recommend this. But unapata bado, they're being pushed across all social media. And unashinda, like, what is the point? Is the point to get people aggravated? Is the point to get people mad? Is the point to get, I don't understand what is happening. Like, you might find channels, even on YouTube or Spotify or whatever platform it is. You find channels that people talk a lot of sense, people talk a lot of facts, people talk a lot of logical discussions, but they're not being pushed. I wonder wako na like 1,000 followers, I wonder wako, and you're like, this is not being pushed. There's this chick I've been following on um what is this called? YouTube. She's called Lovely T, and she has awesome discussions, and especially in the American politics and social issues in America, she addresses them very nicely, and she has a way of bringing the topic to the forefront, even the stupidest person can understand. And I've been following her for quite some time, and there was this time she was talking about her channel being a YouTube channel being shadow banned, and I always thought, like, what are you talking about? Like, YouTube does not have they do not care about you. YouTube does not care about you that much for them to shadow ban you. But mimi nimekuwa nikimfollow, I think, from 2015, and up until 2022 or 2023, if I'm not wrong, is when her YouTube numbers zilipita that mark. Like, alikuwa at a stagnated point. Alikuwa, I think, na 800,000 followers for like all those years. 800,000 followers. It's like, she's not moving, nothing is changing, she's not being pushed. Watu wanasema kwa comments, I knew I had subscribed to this, but I've been unsubscribed. Her commentary, her discussion, her questioning different things about the government na nini are not being pushed to people. So unapata, for someone who wants to seek the truth, who wants to know what is actually happening, getting those people like in a lovely tea, you can't find them easily. Like I don't know how I came. No, I honestly I've remembered. I came across her because I was following another problematic YouTuber, and they had a feud with this lovely tea. Her name was Tasha K. I don't know what had happened, but I used to follow Tasha K. I don't like her that much, but for celebrity gossips and whatever, she was very good at it. She's still very good at it. Like she brings a lot of things to light, like the way Wendy Williams used to do. So when they were feuding, that's when this channel, like unashinda ukishindwa, huyu mtu anashinda akiitwa Lovely T, who is Lovely T, who is this Lovely T, anashinda akiingililiwa. And then I was like, before I side with Tasha K, I need to know who this other person is and what is happening. And that's how I came across her channel. And these two YouTubers are very, very different. Lovely T will take her time with a given topic until she's able to find her facts, she's able to explore, or like she's able to dig deep into a topic before she discusses it. Tasha K on the other hand, ni ikitokea, she goes headstrong, whether it's true or not, like she's there headstrong, just bringing you whatever is happening, hata kama ni uongo, hata kama ni hoax, hata kama ni nini. Why am I venting about this too? You find that of late, kuna some shifts, especially after Trump was elected, kuna some shifts in how people talk about social media, especially in the US, especially after Zuckerberg went on Joe Rogan and was talking about how government is involved with different social media. So that is the trigger for today's topic. I wanted us to discuss how psychology is being used, ama how we're being played into subscribing to things that we don't, like naturally we shouldn't gravitate towards. Unapata you're manipulated into siding with one side or the other. By that, let's look at another thing before into bado ni introduction. During COVID-19, ulikuwa unapata a lot of people were also being shadow banned. A lot of channels were being shadow banned, the ones that were questioning whatever was happening with COVID-19. In terms of if people are discussing why are we getting these vaccines, why can't we wait until we know actually what is happening before we start injecting things into people, why are these vaccines like mbona zimetengenezwa haraka hivyo, and we have something like HIV that has not haina vaccine, like why, what is happening? And a lot of channels like that were being banned, were being shadow banned, were being hadi kuna wanakuwa deplatformed during that time. And what you find that majority of the people, including myself, we were manipulated into thinking that everyone was in agreement with the vaccination, like every country was in agreement with the vaccination. But unapata kuna watu huku chini chini that we are questioning these things a lot. And either way, like I said your time, hata says if something else comes up and they're asking us to get vaccinated and whatever, kama sisi job yetu haungeingia without the vaccine. Like haungeingia, hata watu were vaccinating people, they came to, like the company paid for them to come and vaccinate all of us. There's no competition between me choosing my livelihood and a vaccination. I don't have a tall grandmother I can fall back on. So either way, during that time, I told people, and even Lovely was telling people, if you have to do it, just do it. Because at the end of the day, it's all about you. It's all about your decision. But yes, now that is why I wanted to discuss how psychology is being used to manipulate us. And I wanted to start with the origin of psychology and how it came to be, especially experimental psychology, and how now inakuwa as a tool of control. There's this phrase that someone keeps saying on YouTube, that the next world war will not be fought on the battleground. Itakuwa fought in the, what does she call it? In the itakuwa an information war. I don't remember the phrase that they use, but itakuwa in terms of information. Like hizi stories of propaganda na nini, itakuwa in terms of those lines. Like they no longer need to send soldiers to fight into the battlefield. They'll just use the information, they'll just use social media, they'll use the computers and everything to manipulate us into fighting each other without lifting a finger. Like they don't need to do that. And we've seen that with even closer to Kenya, we've seen it with the post-election violence, we've seen it with the Gen Z movement, how it was squashed by people being used, social media being used to manipulate people into thinking differently. Now, yes, we're exploring the fascinating yet sometimes unsettling relationship between psychology and ethics. How to pursue the understanding of the mind immediately to the point where we are no longer doing it to benefit us as a human race. We are researching more into psychology to be able to become a sleeper agents. I don't know if you've watched any Russian movies or any American movies with Russians, especially when it comes to investigations na vitu kama hizo, where they train. There's this one movie, I don't remember the name very well, but let me use one that I think is common now. Hiyo niliwatchigi kitambo. Young girls na nini have been trained their whole life to be sleeper agents, and then they are sent to America. They are married by American personnel, especially high ranking officers, but wanakuwa kama sleeper agents. They're just waiting for the get go. Like their mind has been brainwashed. They're just waiting for the get go, and they kill whoever they're being told to kill. We can use a scenario like blacklist. Yeah, blacklist. Na hata hiyo tumeona how the mind can be weaponized against someone in some of the episodes. So yes, now that is what we're discussing. That is the long introduction of how psychology is being used to manipulate us. Let's start with the origin of psychology. Throughout history, civilizations such as ancient Egypt, Persia, China, Persia, some people say Persia, Persia, and China have explored the body-mind connection. However, it wasn't until 1800s that psychology was established as a form of science by William Wodens. But in German how you say it. Anyway, he was a German scientist who introduced experimental psychology. His methods of introspection sought to understand human reaction to stimuli, marking the birth of psychology as an empirical discipline. Now, what William used to do, the most renowned psychological experiment that is inaonyesha how the mind can be controlled, they used to use a rat. Wana ring kengele, then they feed the rat. That was the experiment. They ring the bell, they feed the rat. They ring the bell, they feed the rat. To the point where every time they rang the bell, the rat will inakimbia mali inafaa kuwa fed, because it knows this is the trigger for my feeding time. So if they didn't feed the rat, of course it react negatively because it's supposed to be fed. Like this is the sequence of events that I'm following, and that is one of the most basic experiments of how the mind can be controlled. Let's look at something back in Kenya. Unapata we have things that people, tribalism, people being ethnocentric, people being having loyalties to the clans and whatever. Like where you think you originated from, people do have allegiances to that, and there's nothing wrong with it. However, kuna dog whistles in between, where if at any point you decided to question something about, let's say, your tribe, let's start even closer home. if as a woman, let's say I'm a Kikuyu woman, and I decided to question this thing that they keep calling the death of the grandmother, which is basically FGM. If I start questioning something like that, I'll start being scolded. I'm too westernized, and um, I think I'm a white person. I'm subjecting myself to white culture. I'm going to cast my child. I'm going to, like, easy vitu, they become nailed into your brain to the point where every time you think of questioning this, you start thinking, but see, I will curse my family, but see, I will curse my children if I don't do this. If I don't get this, I'm going to do the next. Like, even psychological manipulation. Then you go to the other extent of these people, and there's nothing wrong with it, but there's, anyway, kuna hao watu kwa social media all the time, they're talking about Kikuyu culture, how people should go back to Kikuyu culture, people should go back to Kikuyu culture. But every time you look at the things that they're saying we should go back to doing, you're like, do you realize this thing is not right? Do you realize this thing is wrong? But you can't question it because you've been conditioned to think that by you questioning it, you're going to invoke some sort of curse from the ancestors. Basically, like, those are the basics of psychological control, especially here in Kenya. Then on the general side of things, kama hauja side na Uhuru, kama hauja side na Raila, there is something wrong with you. Kama you're not doing this, kama you're not doing 1, 2, 3 and the next, there's something wrong with you. So you get to a point where you don't want to question anything because something is wrong with you. At the end of the day, you're betraying your tribe, you're betraying this. And people don't understand to what extent this, like, it does a lot of harm. Now what do I live to what extent it does that much harm? Because you find kuna watu kama sisi wa tao, like, we've been brought up in town and whatnot, we might be a little bit more exposed. But there are those people in the rural area when you honor someone from a different tribe, when you honor someone act in a certain way. So unapata huyu msee, every time they meet someone who is different, they've been conditioned to think of them as the enemy. Let's now expand this to a place kama US. One of the things that is like to the detriment, it is ruining things in the US. And you can see it even on social media. Unapata there are people, their whole life, they are white people now wako US and they have black people everywhere. But kuna white people in the US that have never met a black person in their whole life. Recently I was reading a certain story on Reddit, and this chick was Asian. The husband was, according to her, a redneck white person, which means nimse or southern United States, on the southern states of the United States. And when this guy went with the wife to a mall, people were actually, like, were so starstruck, they just stood and stared at her. And at some point she started feeling threatened, but the husband was like, they're just looking at the most beautiful woman in the world. But, like, you can understand that logic. And then our watu, that is one, they've never met someone outside of their race. They've never met someone who is different from them. And then the people who have, ndio wako social media, wakipiga kelele all the time, black people this, Chinese people this, Asian people this, Mexican people this. Over the years, unapata huyu mtu amefika 30 years, they've never met someone outside of their race. But the first time they meet this person, they are conditioned to think if he's black, he's a thief. If he's Asian, akona corona. If, like, easy psychological control. Those are the things that for me, they're so scary, because it is, you have the upper hand when you're the person who is the majority or the powerful person. But these psychological mind games can be used in any way. They can turn an entire paradigm against you. Like, the owners are ukijua you're on the top of the food chain, and then some shit happens, and then au watu sasa ndio wanawageuka. Anyway, sorry about the tangent again. Psychology, by definition, is the study of human behavior and mental processes. This is the study of how we think, how we feel, and how we act. Over time, it has branched into fields like clinical psychology, cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, social and forensic psychology. But as with many scientific, don't mind me, but as with many scientific fields, its early years have blurred the line between progress and ethics. They've crossed that line severally. And some of the things that I wanted to discuss here differently from psychology, but they're in the medical field, are the experiments that have brought forward some of the most renowned medical practices. Nakwambia leo, hey, Jesus. Yeah, some of the most renowned medical practices in the world. I remember when I was young, kuna hii story, like it was a short story book, short stories in a book, inaitagwa something and short stories, like different small stories, but in one book. Inaitwa like a storybook, I don't know. Say tumezoea kusoma novels, I don't even remember that one. But anyway, it was a number of short stories about war, about Nazis, about nini, like, but ni to short stories. And one of them was talking about this scientist who used to pay people to rob graves and bring him the bodies. But it was kitambo kabisa. So they used to call it the ilikuwa the body trade, the cadaver something. The cadaver. In my young mind, I thought it was one of the funniest things. But according to that story, now looking at it from a older person perspective, it is so creepy. I still understand how these scientists thought it was the right thing to do, because hawataenda wakiua watu so that they can check their organs na nini, they can remove the skin from these cadavers and see how the human body operates. And so it was very interesting when I was doing research on this, when I came across that story as well. Anyway, back to the story. When science oversteps ethics, this is the beginning of the short stories. Elvin Charles Stuckman once said, Science cannot stop while ethics catches up, and nobody should expect scientists to do all the thinking for the country. What that statement means is science, if we said we look at the ethical side of science, we're not going to do much. Like your story, the one I was giving about grave robbing, and there are so many ethical violations. Watu wamezika mtu wao vizuri, they know the person is resting in peace, but these people will come and steal the nini at night, the cadaver at night, so that they can go sell it. Like your statement to, I think it may cover like 20 ethical violations. But the benefit of it afterwards, the benefit after this experiment, we were able to see how people can, different organs operate, how different illnesses can be navigated, vitu kama hizo, how pain receptors and whatnot. One of the creepiest things that they found out was the brain can stay alive for how many hours even after you're dead. Like it could still send electrical pulses after hours after the person was already dead. Like some of these discoveries could not have been made if science looked at the ethical side of it. So what Elvis is basically saying, it is not our problem to worry about that as scientists. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just saying, Elvin, it is not our problem to worry about the ethical sides of things. We are going to do whatever we're going to do in the pursuit of science, in the pursuit of knowledge. Someone else has to cater for the ethical sides, which is what the last statement means, and nobody should expect scientists to do all the thinking for the country. This quote encapsulates the ongoing struggle between scientists in the advancement of knowledge and ethical responsibility. Let's take a look at some of the most controversial moments in psychological research. One of them was the Nazi medical experiment in the 1940s. During World War II, Nazi doctors like Joseph Mengele conducted horrific experiments on prisoners, including surgical procedures without anesthesia and genetic testing on twins. These so-called studies were nothing short of torture under the guise of science. Now we tuna compare how bad these things would get. And then the funny thing is, at some extent, especially in the US, the research by Joseph has been used over and over again, even in the medical field. What the conclusions and whatnot that he had made have been used over and over again. And this is why Ulkona Pata, after the World War II, most of the medics, most of the scientists, most of the researchers were absorbed by other countries, especially the United States. Then there was another experiment that I wanted to just highlight the ethic, how they overstepped the ethical boundaries, and that was the Tuskegee study. Tuskegee syphilis study, which ran from 1932 to 1972. For 40 years, African American men suffering from syphilis were left untreated by the United States Public Health Service. They were falsely led to believe they were sorry for that. Anyway, back to the Tuskegee syphilis study. Anyway, they were falsely led to believe they were receiving medical care while researchers studied on the progression of the disease. You see, and then the funny thing was, when I was researching this, I found out that the syphilis thing was introduced to them by these public health services. Like, it's not something that just like walipata by accident. It was a deliberate infection, just like COVID-19. Anyway, the Stanford Prison Experiment in 1971 is another study that is of interest when it comes to the ethical boundaries being broken in the pursuit of science. Philip Zimbardo created a prison simulation that spiraled out of control when participants assigned as guards became abusive and prisoners suffered emotional trauma. The study was stopped after 6 days, but remains as a stark warning about the unchecked psychological experiment. By this Stanford Prison Experiment, he wanted to study the human behavior when people are given power. And initially it was supposed to be 1 week where, let's say like 10 people were brought in a room, 5 of them are made into guards. I only want to control the prison, and then 5 of them are made into prisoners. And then the next week they alternate. But even before the first week ended, that tujafikisha the 7th day, this group of guards, the guards in quotes, the people who were made the guards, were overexerting their power on the prisoners. They were trying to break the prisoners. And the psychology behind this, the idea behind this, in as much as it was to study how people, when you give people power, what they're going to do with it, it also portrayed how the society viewed people, and when you are on a less power, people who are in a lesser position of power. I think that is what I was trying to say. Anyway, this experiment brought forward a lot of issues. And the funny thing, after this doctor realized what was happening, he should have ended the experiment at the beginning. The first instance of either violence or abuse from a guard to the prisoner, he should have ended the experiment. But he waited 6 days because he was like, let's see how far these people are going to take it. And I'm sure if people didn't intervene, he would have done that for the 2 weeks that it was supposed to take place. But the funny thing also, in my head, I was like, I'm very curious. Can you push it? Can you push it? Because I wanted these prisoners to now take revenge on their guards. Because you can imagine if I'm in a position of power, I'm not in a position of power and you keep abusing me, the minute I get into a position of power, I'm going to retaliate. I'm only human, right? Anyway, the third one was, this was not an experiment necessarily, but it showed how, I don't know, imekuwa trend Facebook, like people have been talking about it on social media, but it shows how information in psychology, social media and psychology can be used to manipulate people. And it was the experiment, the social something, about these guys come in, and it's a Cambridge study or something. I don't remember which university it was, but the guy came in and assigned two people, like it's a village, wamefanya village setup na nini, then he assigned two people to be the werewolves, and then the rest knew the villagers. But these werewolves were not like it wasn't an open thing. So how can I put it? Like nikuje nifanye setup na nini na nikwambia wewe ndio mwizi, huyo ndio mwizi mwingine au wengine hawajui. So the only people who knew they were werewolves were the people who were werewolves. The rest didn't know who was the werewolf. And the point of the experiment was, if the villagers were able to out the werewolves, mapema, they all survived and they won. If the werewolves were not identified mapema, they would continue killing the villagers until now the last one. And what this guy was saying was, in every time they did that study, the werewolves won. Remember that statement. These werewolves knew they were werewolves, but the villagers did not know who was the werewolf amongst them. And when it comes to psychology and social media specifically, you find there's a group of elites when you wanajua what is the point of this psychological control. I'll go back to Zuckerberg. A few years back, he was called to the Senate of the United States Senate, and they were talking about information and information control, and the other one was censorship. What they were discussing, your time. And in my mind, I was like, back then, the way I understood it, I was on Zuckerberg's side, because he was like, in as much as you want to censor information, actually to protect children or to protect a given group of people, where does it end? Because in Nezamua, whatever this person is going to say is not suitable for me, it's not good for me. So I censor them. Like, where does it end? Tutaanza kucensor huyu mwingine, eventually no one can say anything. That was my understanding of that Senate debate. But what I later came to find out, and now even he confirmed the same thing when he was on Joe Rogan, the censorship was as much for the people as it was for the people being controlled. It wasn't for the powerful people, the people like the US government, the people who owned this social media stuff. Because unapata hiyo time, they tried to even have people who would rule out violence or graphic videos or graphic posts, vitu kama hizo. And they were being affected psychologically, but that is a whole different topic. But they had these people who were trying to limit as much as possible the kind of garbage that would eventually reach the consumer's eye. But unakuja to find out the US government was also using Facebook as a social experiment. And then what makes it worse for me is, I'm curious, is that Zuckerberg has background in psychology. So he understands how he can use psychology to make Facebook, kwanza hiyo ni statement alitumia in the beginning of Facebook, to make Facebook as addictive as possible. Then unapata saa when they partner with this government, they can promote something. You know the funny thing, people have the fear of missing out a lot. It's a common human behavior. But unapata kama ni social media, let's say for example, they want someone in power. Hata tutumie far from home. They want someone like Kamala Harris in power in the US. Just an example. You find that the government can push for any positive thing about Kamala to trend all over social media, all everywhere. Ukifungua anywhere, it's Kamala. Ukifanya nini anywhere, it's Kamala. What that does, inafanya mtu mwenye ako anamsupport. Let's say you're supporting Trump or someone else. You start questioning, am I in the wrong? Because everyone else is supporting this person. Everyone else is supporting this person. Why am I the only one on the outside? Why am I the only one on the outside? And when it comes back to that, as someone who is very curious about a lot of things, if, like, come on to me the V2 with all that power, as much as they can, why then would I not believe that they did the same for someone like Trump? Because previously, as Zuckerberg confirmed on Joe Rogan, the government has been involved in a lot of these things. So why did it seem like a lot of people, even in Africa and everywhere, were in support of Trump? The funny thing was Trump was everywhere. That is number one. Trump was everywhere. He was being pushed everywhere. The other thing, for me, inakuwa very curious because I'm like, if they didn't want him in power, they had the power to do this, to manipulate people into thinking otherwise. And according to some might agree they tried. Others, like me, I'm very curious. I'm like, they just did the same thing for Trump, on my end. Anyway, back to the story. You're a werewolf. As long as you don't know what is happening, which is us as common Y.A.N.G, we don't know a lot of things that are happening behind the curtain. And these people who are behind the curtain can use anything and everything to manipulate us into whatever decision they need us to make. They can use it. And the demoralization of the Gen Z movement, for me, I think, was affected by the use of social media and psychology to manipulate the entire population into thinking otherwise. We're still going. Psychology has long played a role in warfare, in propaganda, in social manipulation. We've been played like guitars here and there from the 1800s, from the Sun Tzu, that is the Sun Tzu, The Art of War, to modern military strategies. Psychological tactics have been used to manipulate, intimidate, and control. Someone was giving an interesting story the other day. During, I think, World War I or II, maybe, but one of the world wars, they realized that whenever the soldiers were not fighting, like, I think they have breaks in between, whenever they were not fighting, they were waiting for orders from above and things of that sort, soldiers from the different sides would play games, would play football, like they would engage with each other as they normally would outside of the war. So what the government decided to do, either government, was introduce psychologists for each camp. So come on, let's say for example, the UK camp, they introduce a psychologist to cater for my UK army. The other one did a similar thing. And what eventually happened, after this psychological analysis and talking to a psychologist and pouring your heart out about what is going on, they started, these soldiers walianza kuchukiana. Like they stopped playing with each other when they were not fighting. They saw each other as the enemy. I think as they were intended to see each other as. But anyway, you can see how psychology, even during war times, it imetumika to manipulate people. Because basically these are normal people. If let's say Kenya was fighting with Uganda, until a Ugandan opened their mouth or talked to me, I wouldn't know. Tunakaa tu the same. Like, we look the same. I can't look at someone and say this is Ugandan and I should hate this person. Hata akifungua mdomo naongea na nini, I don't have that core hatred in me for me to hate that person. But through the use of psychological manipulation, propaganda, unapata, you already, back to the earlier stories, you already have a preset outlook of what this person is before you even meet the person. Anyway, some of the projects that were used for psychological manipulation during war, the project MKUltra, military dehumanization, and psychological operations. Hiyo nilisikia watu wakiita psyops. It's a very interesting name. Anyway, Project MKUltra was the CIA's mind control experiment in the 1950s. It involved drugging and manipulating subjects, often without their consent, in an attempt to develop interrogatory techniques. Kuna a certain, I hope you guys can check them out. Kuna a certain story that was being read by the Dark Somnium. It's a YouTube channel. And during this story, this guy was listening, alikuwa psychologically manipulated by listening to a certain music or track on YouTube. Like he started listening pole pole, and then he started seeing images in his mind. He started falling in love with the chick in the video, started thinking they have a relationship with this chick. Eventually, like, he found himself at a location where he wasn't sure how he got there. But the funny thing, in between, the government was involved, because they eventually found out they were interrogating this person, and they were using this person to do something. Like, according to them, it's like he was being used to try and bomb a certain church, but I think it didn't work. But it's a very nice story of how MKUltra works. Then there was military dehumanization. Throughout history, soldiers have been trained to see the enemy as less than human, making it easier to justify violence. Kama huyo Prince Harry vile alikuwa anasema, they were taught to see their opponents as pawns on a game, like not human beings. Then hii psyops jina imekuwa ikipop up on my social media feeds, especially with the last plane accident in the US, where a military chopper hit a head-on collision with private commercial airline. Anyway, propaganda campaigns during World War II aimed to weaken the enemy morale and shape the public opinion. That is the use of psychological operations. Social media and psychological manipulation. Now, this is modern in today's world. Psychological tactics are being developed on an even larger scale throughout social media. Platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter use algorithms designed to exploit cognitive biases, keeping users engaged for profit. And initially that was the only thing that they were doing. But later on, you found out an experiment. I'm yet to find good information on it, but there was an experiment, I think, in the 20, I think between 2010 and 2020. I don't remember how many years, but between that period, there was an experiment by Facebook on people, and people didn't consent on it, where they were pushing graphic images, they were pushing very demoralizing stuff. Like, it plunged a lot of people into depression, because every day, every time you'd open your Facebook, every time you'd open Instagram, kulikuwa na stories za either people have been killed somewhere, people death and whatever. In the US, ulikuwa unapata what was being pushed for them, especially for the black community na nini, ni the death of these black people over and over again, to the point where I was in a certain forum about racist cops and killing black people, and I remember asking, are they only targeting black people, or they're killing everyone? And one of the replies I got to my comment, this guy was saying they've killed more white people during these arrests and everything else than they have black people. But what is being pushed, what we keep saying, and what is getting traction is that uh, cops are killing black people. And I found it very, very interesting. And I was like, can you guys push for these stories as well? Because if, in my thinking back then was, if this person kills, killed a black person, chances are they've killed before, they've been violent before, they have a history of violence. That's what I'm trying to say. And if they have a history of violence, is it only against black people? Like, my mind was trying to figure out what is the point behind this. And some of these cops walikuwa napata kama ako involved in this, it wasn't the first time he was in a violent altercation with someone. They've been caught on tape or not dealing with others. Now to some extent it wasn't just one race, it was just everyone they figured was below them. Of course kuna racist cops, kuna hao wenye walikuwa wanaenda above and beyond to kill other people, but ulikuwa una find out in these scenarios kama ni police station inajulikana na kuua black people, if you look at the history, there was a background of them killing other races of people as well. But unapata hiyo the algorithm on Facebook hiyo time ilikuwa ina push for those things for to an extent when personally when I realized this was happening so much, I stopped using Facebook that much. Every time I see such a post, I will click do not recommend, I'm not interested, do not recommend, I'm not interested. Even here in Kenya, ulikuwa unapata every day utapata sijui a post dem anauliwa wapi, sijui nini imehappen wapi. Like unapushiwa hizi vitu, they trigger you into depression because you're like, what's the point of living if every day something negative, something bad is happening? Na kumbe, they are hiding the good things, they are pushing. It was an experiment, they were pushing these stories because they had a target. And that's what I'm saying. I don't have all the information on that, but I know for a fact there was that experiment with Facebook, and you're gonna push the different the negative stories over the positive ones. I think to see people's reaction, to see how much people can be controlled. Anyway, yes. So, kwa social media platforms like Facebook, they've been used over and over again. Then unapata the algorithmic personalization and echo chambers. By showing users content they already agree with. So, hii ilikuwa inatumika, one example was someone who has terrorist tendencies. Ulikuwa unapata the echo chamber anajipata in the people who agree with their ideology. And sasa unaona like this is what everyone thinks. Like this is what everyone thinks. And one good example of echo chamber is the incel community, because ulikuwa unapata a few people who've come out of the incel community, they say it's very, very toxic because they have this negative view about women. Na unapata what normally happens with these negative views, with this negativity, these people go out of, not even go, went out of their way to kill women severally. Like kuna huyo moja mwenye alishoot up a spa. There's another one who shot up a school. There's another one who shot up a mall, but they were targeting women because in that echo chamber, they are being psychologically manipulated into thinking women were the enemy. Anyway, they foster this social media ideological bubbles and societal polarization. Like kila mtu unapata as a lady, if I'm in an echo chamber where men are the enemy, men are not good men, you're being polarized. And then every time you have an interaction with a man and anini, it's negative because you've already been conditioned to think it's negative. Then there was exploitation of cognitive biases. Features like infinite scroll and notifications are designed to trigger dopamine responses and keep users addicted. Hii ndio yenye Zuckerberg alikuwa anasema they were to design Facebook to be as addictive as it can be. Na hiyo ndio wali introduce hii story ya likes. Then later on they introduced the story of the reactionary emojis, anger, wow, na hiyo ingine ilikuwa ni applause, vitu kama hizo. They trigger a dopamine reaction. So unapata if I post something, na hiyo sasa nilikuwa nasema it's so bad. If I post something negative, ama something that is not contributing into the human psychology, into the humanity's growth, the algorithm might push it if people wanna react na ile emoji ya anger. So now, like, already this thing is being manipulated, because something negative like that should not, let's say, if you're going to give it as much visibility as you can, then even the positive things, give them the same visibility. And when people say, see, it's a reaction, it's a, no. Ukiangalia the reactionary emojis, especially on Facebook, they've been assigned different figures or different values. Na ile anger emoji, kale ka emoji kanakuaga ka red, kakona more value than a like or a happy face emoji. So unapata if someone like me gets, let's say, like 5 anger reactions and someone else gets like 5 likes, mine, the algorithm is set to push mine more than the other person. Like, it's manipulation, and it's so unfortunate. Then there was the case study with Cambridge in 2018. It was revealed that data from millions of Facebook users have been harvested without their consent to influence political campaigns, raising questions about the ethic and privacy. I think we've beat that horse to death. Anyway. Then we go to the final thing. Here, it's going to be my bias, especially when it comes to psychology and psychologists and people who go to see psychiatrists. But I'll say the same thing I've said about religion. If it's the thing that is keeping you grounded, if it's the thing that is helping you out, then do it for your own sake. Because at the end of the day, life is so mundane. If you find something that works for you, you just go with it. Anyway, here, this is, I think, one of the last discussions. For me, I found it so weird in the recent years that every behavior, every indiscipline, every negative thing about someone can be explained away by a psychological diagnosis. If I'm a road person, I usually have bipolar. If I'm this, I usually, like, hakuna behavior and it's your fault. And this just led me to the overdiagnosis of mental illnesses. Because unapata everywhere you go, someone has like 10 mental disorders, and then you're like, so nothing is your fault, nothing is your problem. And at the end of the day, I'm not against psychology. I do know that it explains a lot of things and why they are the way they are. But at the same time, if you look at this thing on a broader perspective, it does not make any sense. You can't have BPD, you can't have bipolar disorder, ADHD, some of these illnesses, they even contradict themselves, like they cancel each other out. So at the end of the day, you wonder, like, what exactly are you sick of? Because at the end of the day, you can't have everything. But you imekuwa everywhere. In any discussion you have with someone, let's say, for example, even like I get into a room where my workplace na nini, and I'm angry because someone already did something to make me angry, and I'm expressing to them that I'm mad that you did 1, 2, 3, and 4, but let dismissive and patronizing tone, it's just, unajua unakwaga hivyo, unakwaga bipolar, unajua unakwaga, you had a traumatic, no, this is just here and now. Like, I'm pissed that you did something wrong. I'm angry that you did something wrong. This has nothing to do with background and mental what and what not. Anyway, I've realized in recent years, people are being overly diagnosed and overly medicated on everyday emotions. A survey by the Center for Social Justice found out that 84% of the general practitioners believe normal life stress are being diagnosed as mental disorders, leading to overmedication. Then, by year overmedication, especially it was in the US, where every time you go into a psychiatrical office or whatever, or see a therapist, you wouldn't live without medication. And sometimes maybe you just needed someone to talk to, someone to vent, someone to, but utatoka bila dawa. So what this research found, increasingly normal struggles like stress, sadness are being treated as disorders, like a long-term thing, often ignoring the underlying societal issues like poverty and inequality. And sometimes nilikuwa nasema for some people in my case, of course we had childhood traumas and whatever, but most of my problems can be cured very easily with money. Pesa tu, like poverty na nini inatoa stress mingi sana. Money just will remove a lot of stress for me, because my anxiety, say for example, I'm a very anxious person, and it's not a psychological diagnosis. I'm just generally anxious about everything, but it comes from knowing that unaweza lack at any time, like at any given point in time you might not have your daily needs, like you might not meet your daily needs, like anything can happen. But sasa, for me, that what that means, I need to work more, I need more money, because the more money I have, the less stress I have, like the less anxious I am. I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from. I don't have to worry about where my, like the dress or whatever. If I go to the shops na nini ama nikitembea black market nione kiatu tamu, I don't have to live there feeling sad because I can afford the shoe. I'll just buy it. Like money solves a lot of problems for me. But what this study found in the US, people are being overly medicated for simple daily struggles. And then we find that the corporate and government have a lot of influence here on this over medication. So pharmaceutical companies benefit from mass diagnosis, while government and corporation may exploit mental health narratives for control. And now you find that with the ethics behind this, some of these drugs were discovered by chance. Like it's not something, hakuna mtu aliset out ati people are very sad, let me see this, if this drug will help out, if this will work out. Mostly we're going to put someone is on this treatment and then they are having an increase in maybe a certain hormone, na hiyo hormone inafanya they being nonchalant about a lot of things. So this diagnosis na nini ama these psychiatrists, they come in and start recommending that drug. Then inakuwa researched and whatnot, like this is an entire story in itself. So napata at the end of the day, in as much as you're being given a certain drug because you're sad or depressed, that is going to help you through the day, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just questioning the ethical side of it. Kama uko on drugs, psychology or whatever, they're working out for you, good for you. Do not stop taking your drugs because I'm venting about psychological manipulation. You just go ahead and do it. Whatever works, works. Anyway, back to what I was saying. And then the use of these drugs, unapata, they have their own side effects. They have their own issues. So the more you're taking this drug, eventually you're going to be given another drug to treat a side effect of this other drug. Like at the end of the day, these people who started medication, but then unajua the medication had also started with kids. Like they started medicating even watoto. Unashindwa mtoto anamedicatiwa stress gani? Anyway, by the time even this person is becoming an adult, they are on so many drugs, what are we doing now? Like which one is working and which one is not. So in conclusion, psychology is a very, very powerful tool. It has helped millions understand themselves, heal from trauma, and improve their lives. But it has also been used and misused, from unethical experiments to mass psychological manipulation. As we navigate the world, increasingly shaped by psychology, we must ask, are we using psychology as a tool for empowerment or a means of control? Personally, I'm leaning more towards the means of control. I'm in marketing, and the other day I came across a book, and it was Psychology of Marketing, and I've been trying to read it. And in that book, you'd realize the way they use colors, the use of colors, the use of certain terms, the use of certain images, the use of certain shapes and symbols. A lot of people are attracted to these things. so unapata wanazitumia to sell their products. Unapata kuna certain shapes appeal more to men than women, so at the end of the day unapata wana push more, they push more of the, they push more of these shapes and symbols na nini to manipulate people into buying these products. So at the end of the day ukiona mimi nikisema hiyo ya I'm leaning more towards control, that is what I mean. Let's continue this conversation in the comments. Let's discuss as much as we can. Najua nimeguzilia small things and there, but this is an entire topic that I'd love to debate with people because it will expose me to a lot of things. So thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.